All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. And this is Rick Kaufman here. Hey, want to welcome you. We'll just give a minute or so here. Let a couple people maybe jump on here. Um, got my coffee. Anyways, as you can kind of see from the title here, hey, Lori. Um, Today's, Tuesday's coffee break. I'm going to talk about engaging with people online. That's going to be a very, very small portion of my talk here today. The rest of the conversation is going to be um, about about basically a conversation that I had. And this is where sometimes engaging with people, it'll lead you into a conversation that sometimes you may not even be aware of where it's going to take you. So I want to, so that's what we're going to talk about. But before we do, though, I want to set this conversation, this coffee break up. I'm currently reading a book. Let me get rid of that. I'm reading a book by Brian Houston, and it's called "Live, Love, and Lead." He's from Australia, and he's a minister, a preacher of Hillsong Church, and this book actually got it at Ollie's. It was very inexpensive. It was like $4. I mean, $4 at Ollie's. Okay, they got a lot of books, a lot of inspirational books, things like that. This book kind of jumped out to me. Let me just say, all of us here are in the water safety, drowning prevention community. We've been talking since the first of the year a lot about having conversations with people, deepening your relationships, discovering the one thing that you need to do today to move your mission forward by, going small, getting in touch with yourself, asking exactly what it is you need to do. Well, this book I felt jumped out at me when we were at Ollie's, and I'm on chapter 4. I just started this book over the weekend, and I'm on chapter 4. And let me just say, the first chapter he talked about his personal story as a child where he almost drowned. They had a vacation home. They went to a lake house, very deep lake, a lot of big currents in this lake. And it was kind of foggy that day. They got out a little too far, him and his brother, and he dropped his oar. His brother made a joke and says, "We'll jump in and get it." Well, he did jump in, but the current took him away from the boat. He got to the oar, but he was unable to swim back to the boat. His brother then jumped in the water, and then, of course, he's thinking, well, that's not going to do any good because I can't swim back to the boat. So how in the world are you going to swim back to the boat, with me in this oar? Well, he tied a rope to himself, his older brother, and was able to pull him and his brother to the boat or bring the boat to them. So they made it back to shore. Then in chapter 3 that I read this morning, he has 2 golden retrievers. Hence, we have a golden retriever. I've had golden retrievers ever since I was a young kid. And he talked about this golden retriever going to the river and to a summer home. And one morning they woke up and the golden retriever had drowned, and they found the body of his favorite pet floating in the water. So in 3 chapters, this book has spoke to me about drowning. And so I wanted to kind of point that out. But every day, we reach out and we connect with people. And some time ago, I reached out to a gal. Her name is Chani Melman, and she was living in Miami. She's now in Israel, and she's a life coach, but she's also a swim instructor. So we interviewed her as part of our podcast, last year, and we shared her story. We shared her passion for swimming, and also what she can bring to this world for people that might be struggling, and things like that. And so we put that out on our podcast, hoping that maybe some families, people that might be struggling with certain things in their life would share that. Well, over this past year or so, we've stayed in touch. Obviously, we make these connections. Well, she started a podcast. And she interviewed me last night. Like I said, she lives in Israel, and so interviewed us on the podcast. Not so much from the water safety. We do this did open the door and allow us to share some of our story, a little bit about this, but this really went in much deeper. And the reason why I'm talking to you about this is it may or may not really have anything to do with water safety, but how many times each day that we wake up and sometimes want to quit? There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it and want to quit and want to give up. And because it's tiring. It's tiring. You know, people don't listen. People don't want to listen. That's one problem. The other problem is I have built up this kind of like wall or whatever. And I've always said, ever since my daughter Kelsey drowned, I've always said I'm not the same person that I once was. I've never been able to put my finger on it. But very slowly over the past few years, I've been getting closer to determining why that is. And because I reached out and connected with Chani, and we had this discussion on my podcast, we then had this discussion on her podcast, and she did a coaching segment with me where she coached me through some limiting beliefs, kind of being aware of your surroundings, aware of your feelings, aware of your emotions, aware of some of the things, and then kind of question, where is some of this coming from? And because I don't know how many of you have ever felt like you wanted to reach out and talk to somebody, but that person has a job title, a description, their photograph, or their, whatever you see online, or it might be in person, whatever you see, they're very well dressed, got a very fancy office, whatever the case is. They're highly educated. They have a whole bunch of letters behind their name. And so that means they're probably have some education, some degrees, special training, and they work in aquatics, they work in water safety, they run a really a great nonprofit, a great foundation, and you stop right there, and you don't do anything. You don't make that connection. You don't connect with them, so you don't engage with them because of maybe feeling inferior, or maybe not feeling equal to, or whatever the case is. So we had this conversation last night, and the conversation took me to the place where I run into that every day. I connect with people every single day. I spend a portion of my day sending out connection requests via Facebook or LinkedIn, and sometimes Twitter. And then I reach out after I don't really have a problem connecting with people. It's the engagement part. And like I said, we're talking, we need to engage with people because, we never know just where that conversation is going to lead us. But because of their title, their letters, or their education, I don't engage with them. And I connect with them. I don't have a problem with that. But then that engagement, sometimes I skip over them. Okay. And I go to the next person. Maybe the next person doesn't have all the letters after their name. Maybe they don't have a profile picture. So I don't know what they look like. So from that standpoint, it's you don't deepen that relationship with that person, and you never know what they could do for you. See, this is all in my head. This is all in the back of my mind of what I'm going through. So in this podcast last night, we got talking, and I've had some business coaches, some transformational coaches in my life, in my past, and I've paid a lot of money to hire a coach to help me in my business, to help me develop everything that I've developed. I've invested in myself heavily over the last several years. In some cases, it has not paid any type of ROI, but I guess, in some respects it has, but maybe it's not a financial return on investment. But it's like I did some really deep thinking, and in the process of developing my story, and this is going back when I was working in the grief space, when I was working with families and not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, not feeling smart enough to maybe do what it is that I do, because I don't have all those letters after my name. I don't have the degree. I'm a graduate, and I hold a master's degree from the School of Hard Knocks. And I know in my own life that I believe that probably the degree from the School of Hard Knocks is probably a much more valuable degree than the guy that has all the letters after his name and has not experienced what I've experienced. I know that. But to have that conversation with that guy that has all those letters, he may not be very welcome, because, again, he doesn't see us as equal, and I don't see us as being equal. And actually, I see him above me, and I think he sees me below him. At least that's what's in my head. So part of the podcast last night was, where is this coming from? Where is this thought, this limiting belief, where is this coming from that might stop me in my tracks to where I don't engage with somebody about water safety, that can move our podcast, that can move our mission, that can maybe connect us to somebody else that would be the right person, that will move our mission forward to make a difference, to reduce the numbers of drowning, because it is that important. But we stop ourselves. And so my question to you is, how many of you do that? How many of you each day stop yourself and you don't do it? You go on to a different task. You go on to something else. You stay busy. Okay, that's me. I'm busy all day long. In some cases, it's not really productive busy, but I'm getting better. But anyways, before we run out of time on our coffee break, let me get to where I was going with this. Back in 5th grade, I had a school teacher, Mrs. Townsend. If you ever think back, if you ever had a childhood crush on a teacher or somebody, that was me. I had a childhood crush on my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Townsend. And the one thing about that is she was my math teacher. She called me up in front of the room to solve a problem. And this problem was a mathematical problem that dealt with sets, okay? Sets of marbles. I had one set over here, another set, and from what I can remember, there were sets of marbles, and I had to work this problem and come up with the answer to the problem. Well, I blew it. I got it all wrong, didn't understand, froze. People in the classroom laughed at me because it was a real simple problem. But whatever the reason was, I messed it up, got it all wrong. She then labeled me, if you imagine, marbles, okay? And she labeled me as Captain Marbles. I thought it was funny, it was cute. I laughed just right along with all them. But as time goes on, it's like, marbles, people have, marbles for brains, they, whatever the case is. In other words, I'm Captain Marbles and I don't have a brain in my head. And that I really wasn't smart enough to solve a simple problem. And I really wasn't good enough, to solve that problem. And so I really wasn't worthy to, be up in front of the class. Well, needless to say, life goes on, and that gets buried in the subconscious, and it doesn't come out until a few years ago. And I started looking at this as part of my story. Well, last night, I kind of had, we did a coaching session on her podcast as me as the victim, if you will. And we went through this, and this came up again. This came up because I was talking about these people that, I'm not able to engage with because I see them as superior to me, as I see them as somebody that's above me. I see them as somebody who's highly educated. I see them as somebody that may not, value what I can bring to them or value what I can offer. So from that standpoint, I do nothing. And then after that, she asked me this one simple question. When you were a child, what was the one thing here, there you go. The one thing again comes up. What was the one thing that maybe somebody might have said to you that might make you feel inferior, that might make you feel that? And that popped into my head. I mean, there's probably other things I could have said, but that popped in my head. And I put two and two together as part of this breakthrough. And I said to myself, Mrs. Townsend was my fifth grade teacher. She was somebody who was educated. She was a person of authority, and she was a leader over the class. So that stigma of somebody who's in authority as a leader and labeled me as that I wasn't smart, and that stuck with me. So there's this little fear sometimes of engaging with certain people in this industry or certain people in aquatics or water safety that I build up in my head because of their status or their position or whatever the case is, that I'm not necessarily smart enough or worthy enough to speak to them about water safety. In other words, what I can offer to their organization, what I can offer. And so it stops me in my track, and I don't have that conversation. I have conversations with people every day. In many cases, people that are highly educated. But I find I work around that in a way and kind of come in through the back door when I don't need to come in through the back door. And so my question to you is, how many of you feel that way, want to have that conversation with people, and you don't? Well, let me go back to my book here, okay? I want to share with you something that I read today, and this kind of sums it all up, I think, in this chapter, because, we all been called to do something, and I shared that in the podcast last night. I said, I feel that I've been called to do this. I feel that I've been called to join in and have a conversation, to engage with people. But because I have limited beliefs, because I feel that I'm not worthy or good enough, I hold back and I don't do that. Because of something from fifth grade. So this is something I read in the book here. So again, this is from the book I just picked up. It's Live, Love, and Lead by Brian Houston from Hillsong Church out of Australia. But in this, he says, if you focus on who other people are and what they are doing and all that they have, then you'll end up comparing yourself and coming up short. God has not called you to be anyone else. In other words, anyone else's imitation. If you try to become who others want you to be, even when they are well-intentioned and they may love you, you will remain unsettled because you're not being your real self or the real you. This right here really describes the conversation that I just had last night on that podcast. Something where we're trying to engage with people, talk to them about water safety, talk to them about something that's important because, I'm trying to be something that I'm not, maybe. I don't know. Then he goes on here on the next page, says, whether you are graced with a gift of leadership or a gift of athletics or a gift of creativity, we are all called to be good stewards and faithful servants of what is in our hands. So we are in water safety. This is what is in our hands. We have to be good stewards with this information. God has entrusted us with this information. We've entrusted ourselves with this information. So we need to engage with these people because it's that important. No one is exempt. And if you didn't play your part, we would be missing out on the unique grace and the individual strengths that you bring to the here and now. So in other words, by the strengths, my life lessons, the things that I've learned through my own experiences of losing my daughter to drowning, and everything that I've learned from going to seminars and coaching people, and the thousands of phone calls I've had with aquatics professionals to learn from them, I have information. I have valuable information. And so if I don't do that, then, I'm not going to be able to bring those strengths to be able to bring them to the here and now. In other words, I'm letting something from fifth grade stop me. And here's where he wraps us up here. It is as we discover our strengths and grow comfortable in the grace we have been given that we will begin to see the promise that God has for us, and we will be wide open species in the future, and our future will actually begin to take shape. So I found I don't know. It's amazing that the 3 chapters, 2 stories, one where he almost drowned, and then one of a dog that drowned. So there's some water, interesting water safety information in here. Podcast last night where I connected with a person, spoke with them just about a year ago, and then interviewed them on my podcast, who then they're now in Israel and started a podcast. And then they interviewed and get my story. We go through a coaching program and we go a little bit deeper into that. And I have a little breakthrough realizing that, that there are, I do have gifts. I do have information, that I do have this. And if I don't do this and I let this limiting belief from something from fifth grade stop me from moving forward because I think of some, idea that somebody has a whole bunch of letters behind their name, that they're better than I am, then from that standpoint, who am I kidding? And then I stop. And so, which I'm not doing the mission any justice if I do that. So my question to you is, how many of you have had this issue or problem? And so we need to engage with people. We need to talk to them about our stories, because if we don't, somebody that we know, somebody that maybe we don't know, maybe we will connect with somebody, and we will make a difference in their life and save somebody's life to get them involved in some type of water safety program and something. So we can't stop. We have to engage with people. We have to have that talk with them. So guys, that's all I've got. I've been on here for 22 minutes, almost 23 minutes. So I'm going to finish my coffee. I've got some work to do. I've got some artwork. We're redoing our logos. We're rebranding, like I said, we're rebranding the podcast. We are really all over the place, and we're focusing on 2 things. And just so you know, our Kelsey Code program is going to be changing. We're doing away with a couple other things and consolidating this all in part of this group, and it's going to be called the K Corner going forward. So look for that here probably in the next day or so. And we'll wrap up with our water safety checklist. We'll get that out. We'll start letting people submit that or use that as part of their things. And if you have any tools, resources like that, any information when I get that out, just request, and I will send you a copy of it. Take a look at it and critique it and send me all your red ink all over it. Okay, guys. Hey, it's Tuesday. Have a great Tuesday. Have a great day. Get some more coffee. And it's time to get to work before the boss fires us, right? Coffee break's over. See you guys.